Saral Japani, Japanese learning made easy. Konnichiwa minasan. Hey friends, how are you? Welcome to Saral Japani YouTube channel, and this is your friend Sujoy bringing you Japanese lessons for beginners. Today is lesson number 113, and the topic for today is rules of verb conjugation, past tense of group 2, 3 and 4 stem verbs. This is the part 3 of this series of rules of verb conjugation. Please note that the previous two lessons, that is 111 and 112, are the mandatory prerequisites for this lesson 113. That means unless you are done with the previous two lessons, the concepts that we will be discussing today may not be very much clear. So what did we study in the last two lessons? Let's take a look at that. In lesson 111, we discussed about the stem form or the base form or the plain form of a verb. So what's that? So until lesson 110, that is 110th lesson, we mostly use the mass form of the verbs. That means mas, masen, mashta, and masendeshta. These forms we have used, and these are the formal forms of the verbs. For example, tabemas, nomimasen, ikimashita, ikimasendeshita. But the stem form of the verb or the plain form of these verbs we have started learning from lesson number 111. So why verb conjugation is necessary? Verb conjugation is basically adding some suffix to the stem form of the verb, and there are several significances, several uses, several implications of verb conjugation. We also studied about the parts of a conjugated verb, generic rule of mass and stem form of verbs in a sentence. We learned that we can use only one mass form of a verb in a sentence. The If there are more than one verbs present, then the rest of the verbs needs to be represented using their plain form. We then had a recap of the four categories of verbs, which are divided into group 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you have forgotten these, then please go back to that lesson and study these four groups. And then we studied about the conversion from stem form to mass form for each of these four groups. So there are certain rules that govern the conversion of the verbs. Then in lesson number 112, we studied the past tense of group 1 stem verbs. There are many exceptions in this category. We also studied about that. So all these we have studied, and we shall take these concepts forward in today's lesson. And in that way, we shall deal with the past tense of group 2, 3, and 4 in today's lesson. So let's have a quick recap of how we arrived at the past tense form for group 1 verbs. So group 1 verbs are basically, to remind you, those verbs whose plain form end in the Roman character U. That is, for example, Gambaru, Suvaru, Savaru, Agaru, and so on. So as you can see on the screen, Gambaru, the formal present tense is Gambarimas. The formal past tense is Gambarimashita. And if we want to convert Gambarimashita into its past form, then it becomes Gambatta. So Gambarimashita. So from Gambaru, it became Gambarimashita. So you have to remove this entire Rimashita and add TTA, that is Ta, Gambatta. Similarly, Suvaru becomes Suvatta, Savaru becomes Savatta, Agaru becomes Agatta. But this is not that simple because there are several exceptions, as you can see on this screen. We studied this in the last lesson. So let's have a quick recap. Iku, ikimas, ikimashita, itta. Aimas, au, aimashita, atta. Kaimas, kau, kaimashita, katta. Nomimas, nomu, nomimashita, nonda. So the exceptions have been highlighted in pink color, and the generic rules are generic rule governing past tense forms are written in green characters. That means those follow the usual rule, but the pink ones, they do not follow the generic rule. So they are exceptions. So nomu becomes nonda, yomu becomes yonda, hashiru becomes hashitta, hanas becomes hanashita, suwaru suwatta, kaku kakimas, that is to write, it becomes kaita. Again, it is an exception because it doesn't become katta, it becomes kaita. Kikimas, the base verb is kiku, to listen or to ask, kikimashita, and the plain past form is kita. Arukimas, aruku, arukimashita, aruita. Asobu becomes asonda, and kaeru, from kaerimas, it becomes kaetta. This again follows the generic rule of these group 1 verbs. So this is how you convert the present plain form of group 1 verb to the plain form past tense. So ikimas, ikimashita, aimas, aimashita, this kind of formal uh, present and past tense we studied until lesson 110, but now we have started learning about the plain form or the base form or the stem form of the verbs, because they have their own significance which will be clear in as we move forward in this course. Now there were several exceptions that we studied in the last lesson for group 1 verbs past tense. For example, kaku becomes kaita, kiku becomes kita, isogu becomes isoida, nugu becomes nuida, tobu becomes tonda, yobu becomes yonda, tatsu becomes tatta, matsu becomes matta, shinu becomes shinda, kau becomes katta. So there is no exception here. Au, atta, varau, varatta, hanas, hanashta, kasu, kashta, yomu, yonda, nomu, nonda. So there is no rule. You can just memorize this based on the, if you see, this is ending in ku. Kaku and kiku ends in ku. So these are the exceptions. So kaku becomes kaita, kiku becomes kita. The same rule both are following. Similarly, gu, the stem verbs that ends in gu, isogu and nugu both follow isoida, nuida. That means ida. So ku ending these two verbs, they end in ita, and gu ending verbs, they end in ida. Similarly, bu ending verbs, tobu and yobu, they end in onda, tonda, yonda. Tatsu, matsu, tatta, matta. Shinu, shinda. So this ends in nu. Au, katta, kau, katta, au, atta. Varau, varatta. So all these three which ends in au, they have the same rule. So in this way you can try to memorize these exceptions. Verbs ending in su like hanas and kas, they become hanashta, kashta. So these are the plain past tense forms of these stem verbs. And again, yomu and nomu, they end in mu, so yonda and nonda. So these are the exceptions for past tense formation of group 1 verbs. So with that recap, so all these we have studied in detail in the previous lesson. We just did a recap because it has been a while that we did the last lesson. There has been a gap because I wasn't well. So I thought of having a quick recap so that you can relate with what I am going to teach today. So now let's come to our today's topic, group 2 stem verbs past tense form. So group 2 verbs, which are the group 2 verbs? Group 2 verbs are those verbs that end in the Roman IRU or ERU. For example, taberu, miru, neru, shiraberu, akeru. So As you can see in each of these, they either end in the Roman eru or Roman iru. So don't go with the hiragana or the kanji version of this. The reason for writing these in Roman is that so that you can understand very easily. So the definition of group 2 stem is that they should end in Roman eru or iru. Now if you convert this to Japanese, then mi will have a kanji and then ru. So you will get confused that where is iru, because there is no iru, because mi is a single character in Japanese. So better to understand this concept in English or Roman, to be more precise. So what is the rule of conversion from stem present tense to stem past tense for group 2? The rule is that you have to take the base form of the verb, you have to delete the ru at the end, and you have to add ta. So for example, taberu, to eat, it becomes tabeta, because we just replace the ru with ta. So very, very simple. This is unlike group 1, which was bit complicated. It was not complicated, but there were several, in fact many exceptions, because and due to these exceptions, the group 1 past tense of stem verbs becomes little confusing, complicated, and bit difficult to remember and memorize. But for group 2 stem, it is straightforward. Verb minus ru plus ta. Taberu becomes tabeta. Miru becomes mita. Neru becomes neta. Shiraberu becomes shirabeta. And akeru becomes aketa. So in this way, you can think of more verbs that end in eru or iru, and you just need to replace the ending ru with ta. This is group 2 stem verbs. Then we have group 3 stem verbs, past tense form. And again, what are the group 3 verbs? There are just two verbs in group 3. These are also called irregular verbs because they do not follow any pattern. So they do not follow the rule of group 1, or they do not follow the rule of group 2. So these are only the two verbs which are completely out of those groups. So kuru and suru. Kuru means to come and suru means to do. So I'm sorry for this mistake. So this is to do, that is doing some work. So kuru, to come, this becomes kita, the same rule, but as you can see here, it doesn't becomes kuta. Kuru doesn't becomes kuta, unlike the rule of group 2, but kuru becomes kita. Similarly, suru becomes shta. Shta. So this is devoicing of vowels. We do not say it as shita, we call it as shta. Shta. That means shta. The pronunciation is shta. It's not shita. It's shta, not shita. Kuru becomes kita, suru becomes shita. So as I said, there is no fixed pattern in this category. In fact, the syllable of the stem itself has changed. That means ku has become ki, su has become she. So it's not kuta or suta, it's kita and shita. Kuru becomes kita, suru becomes shita. This is the reason why these two verbs are kept as a separate group, and these are called irregular verbs. And finally, we have the group 4 stem verbs, past tense form. So this should be straightforward because group 4 verbs are nothing but adding a noun in front of suru. That means to do the noun. So noun word is a word that can be in English, that can be used both as noun and verbs. For example, study. So study can be used as a noun, and it can also be used to express the verb to study. So for example, benkyo suru means to study. So here benkyo is the noun and suru is the suffixing verb. That means to do study. That means to study. So benkyo suru becomes benkyo shita because suru becomes shita in the past tense form of its plain form. Denva suru, to call or to telephone, denvashta. Sampo suru, to take a walk, samposhta. So this is again straightforward. So if you know group 3 past tense conversion, then group 4 is very simple, only the conversion from suru to shta, whereas the noun remains unchanged. So now we are going to look at several examples involving the past tense of stem verbs. We will use both group 1 and group 2 verbs and also some group 3 and group 4 verbs as well. So let's take the first example. I bought a novel yesterday. So now we are at a stage that you should be able to translate these simple sentences into Japanese. So I bought a novel yesterday. What would we say in the formal uh, format? It's watashi wa kino shosetsu kaimashita. We can use watashi wa or don't use, that's up to you. Even if we don't use, that's fine, because it is implied that I'm talking about myself. So kino shosetsu kaimashita. That means yesterday I purchased a novel. So now kaimashita is the formal past tense of the verb kai, cow, or kaimas. Now what it will be in the plain form past tense? It will be watashi wa kino shosetsu o katta. Kaimashita becomes katta. So this is group 1 verb. The second example is I drank delicious tea at my teacher's house. So teacher's house is sensei no uchi. As you know, we did this example earlier also. So sensei no uchi de oishi kocha o nomimashita. We can also write watashi wa sensei no uchi de oishi kocha o nomimashita. I drank delicious tea at my teacher's house. Now, nomimashita becomes nonda. As we saw, this is again group 1 verb, and this is a clear-cut exception, because nomimashita, it doesn't becomes notta or something like that, but it becomes nonda. Sensei no uchi de oishi kocha o nonda. Sensei no uchi de oishi kocha o nomimashita is the formal sentence. Sensei no uchi de oishi kocha o nonda is an informal sentence, because we are using the plain form of the verb nomu. So nomu, nomimas, nomimashita, nomu, nonda. Next is I sang songs with my friend for 2 hours. 2時間 tomodachi to ishoni uta o utaimashita. 2時間 means 2 hours. As you know, we did this kan, jikan. So you know that very well. 2時間 means 2 hours. Tomodachi to ishoni. That means with my friend. Uta. Uta means song. And utaimashita means I sang. I sang songs, or I sang a song with my friend for 2 hours. So utaimashita, utaimas. Now what should it become in the plain form? It becomes utatta. Again, this is a group 1 verb. 2時間 tomodachi to ishoni uta o utatta. The next example is I left home at 8 o'clock in the morning. Asa 8時 ni uchi o demashita. Now demas means to exit, that is to leave. As you can see here, this is the kanji for exit. So you will see this kanji in at public places where they mean exit. So exit from there, enter, exit. So this is the symbol for exit. So asa means this morning. Hachiji ni, at 8 o'clock. Uchi o demashita, I left home. So demashita will become deta. So this is now group 2, because shita, demas becomes deta. Asa 8時 ni uchi o deta. I went to bed at 11 o'clock yesterday. Kino 11時 ni nemashita. So again, it becomes kino 11時 ni neta. This is again group 2 verb. Nemas, nemu. So it's kino 11時 ni neta. Neru. So the base form present tense is neru. and it becomes neta. So similarly for Demas, it is Deru, which becomes Deta. So here Neru becomes Neta. So Nemashta is Neta. I asked the woman an address. Onna no hito ni jusho o kikimashita. Now, kikimashita, friends, do not get confused because this is more used for to listen or to hear something, but at the same time, this is also used to ask something to someone. So, onna no hito ni jusho o kikimashita. Jusho means address, someone's address. Onna no hito. So, I asked the woman about an address. Onna no hito ni jusho o kikimashita. Now, kikimashita is kiku. So we know that kiku is a group 1 verb because it ends in u. So onna no hito ni jusho kita. So this is an exception of group 1 category. So it doesn't becomes kitta, it becomes kita. Onna no hito ni jusho kita. So in this way, friends, you can practice, you can form your own small sentences, short sentences, and which if you practice, then you will remember also these verbs, because otherwise you might forget, especially the group 1 verbs. There are, since there are many exceptions, so it is very easy to forget if you do not stay in touch with these. So I would suggest you that during your free time, you just think about some sentences using, applying these verbs, so that this get does not go out of your head. I sent the package. Nimotsu o okurimashita. So okurimas is the verb, or okuru is the verb, which means to send. Nimotsu means package or packet or a box. So nimotsu o okurimashita. So okurimas, okuru becomes okutta. This is again a group 1 because okuru, which ends in u. So okurimashita, okutta. I practiced tennis. Tennis no renshu o shimashita. So now this is group 3 verb. Suru shimasu. Tennis no renshu means practice of tennis. Tennis no renshu o shita. So suru becomes shita. Suru shimasu, shimashita, shita. Next is I ate rice or I ate my meal. Gohan o tabemashita. So here let me correct it. Gohan o tabemashita. Gohan o tabeta. I took a walk. Sampo shimashita. Sampo shita. So we saw all these. So this is again group 4 now. So group 1, group 2, group 3. This is again now group 4. Sampo shimashita. I took a walk. Sampo shita. So that was about the 4 groups of verbs and their past tenses in plain forms or base form or stem form. So any of these words may be used for that. But there are some important points that you must remember. First is the plain form or stem form, base form of verbs are used in informal communication. That means to be used especially among friends and younger people who are known to you, and with very close colleagues also you can use, but never use these plain forms. For example, tabeta, kita, nakatta, all these you should not use in formal communication, and not to be used with elderly people or your superiors at work or with strangers. And in those cases, the formal mas form should be used. That means mas, masen, mashta, masendeshta. So those forms that we have been studying since beginning should be used. So plain form verbs are basically used for informal situations, and also plain form verbs are mandatorily used in compound sentences. That means where more than one verb is present. This is because in compound sentences where there are more than one verb, in those sentences only the main verb which is at the end of the sentence is is represented using the mass form. Rest all the verbs in the sentence will be represented in the plain form. So this is how it works, and this will be explained in very near future lessons when we start discussing about simple compound sentences. And other than that also, there are several other applications of the plain form of verbs, that is stem form, that we just saw, which we shall keep discussing later in this course as and when they appear in the lessons. So friends, that was all about today's lesson, verb conjugation part 3, where we discussed about the past tense of group 2, 3 and 4 stem verbs. So this is the snapshot of all the 113 lessons that we have done so far. So you can pause the video here and you can take a look. If you are new to this channel, you can take a look at what all we have discussed so far, and if you feel like going through these lessons, then please go back to the playlist. The playlist name is Japanese Lessons for Beginners, and you will find all these 113 videos together at under the same playlist and in a serial order, and you can watch the videos. And even if you are an old timer of the in this channel, then also as practice you can always go back to the past lessons and revise, because since we are not native speakers, so it is very easy to forget unless we keep practicing or unless we are in touch with the language. So friends, that's all for today. If you are watching this channel today for the first time, then I would request you to subscribe to this channel so that whenever I upload a video, you get instant notification. Saral Japani is the name of this channel, and I wait for your feedback at youtube.com/@saraljapani. Now I also have an email address, saraljapani@gmail.com, in which you can send me personal messages which you may not feel like posting on the video comments, so you can send me private email at saraljapani@gmail.com. So that's all for today, friends. I will see you again in the next video. Till then, goodbye. Mata imasho.